because the current of the world will always continue. The current is the current. You can't stop the current. You can't pray, Lord, I just pray that you will stop the current of culture that is going negatively. No, the world will be the world and is doomed without Jesus, like you and I are doomed without Jesus. So you can't stop the current, but you can't go opposite to the current. You can't be counter current generation. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Andrew Ramon Show. It is yet another Monday, another episode. How you guys doing? You guys doing pretty good? Man, this is episode 133, 132. I honestly can't keep track anymore. If this is your first time tuning into this show, I know you'll love the content of it because we have addressed so many things. This show is about having deep conversations about deep topics and especially approaching them from a Christian perspective, because I believe, and this is something that we're going to be talking about a lot in this episode, I believe that you need to live your life in a relevant way. But that doesn't mean that you have to compromise on your faith. That doesn't mean that you have to compromise about truth. You can live with relevancy, but you can also defend your faith with reason and stand with truth. It's going to be an amazing episode. I already know it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We got an amazing announcement coming up here soon this week. So you want to follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm going to be making the announcement. So that's at the Andrew Ramon Show. So follow me there on Instagram. And also, while you're over there on the social media platforms, have you checked out the newest episode of the Andrew Ramon Show? Like the one last week, we talked about abortion. That's right. We were responding. You should see the title. Was it? It was not clickbait. I'm always kind of on the edge of clickbait, but honestly, check it out. Whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, or on YouTube. On YouTube, we named it Andrew Ramon Shreds Pro-Abortion Christian Arguments, and someone commented in that they thought it was a really, really good episode. Solid arguments and never attacking the person. So if you haven't already, check that episode out, because I do believe it is a conversation that we all need to learn how to have that conversation and just talk about these deep topics. Well, today, I'm pumped, guys, because this is something that I'm going to kind of share with you, the DNA of this show, in a way that's going to inspire you. Because as the title is labeled or called, it is very appropriate, because I want to let you know something. You are the counter-current generation. Now, you might be thinking, okay, what do you mean by counter-current generation? Well, we're going to be kind of, as you say in Spanish, desglosando, or kind of breaking down that term by looking at two biblical examples of people who were counter-current in their generation, and how that can be you and myself. Because I just want to remind you something. You know, all of us, especially as young people, and everybody in this case, but especially as a young person, you want to make a difference. You want to learn why you're here. As it's been said many times, and it remains true, is that the two greatest days of your life are the day that you're born and the day that you find out why. We are all here kind of on a journey, and we're trying to figure out, why are you here? Why does it make a difference that me, Andrew, is born on this earth? Does it make a difference? If I die tomorrow, would it really matter? I think it would. And that's not me being selfish. That's just me being assured of the purpose that God has for me here. But let me ask you, does it matter that you're here? By the way, spoiler alert, it does matter, because you have a very specific purpose that God has placed on your life. Now, I understand that sometimes we go through life hearing that, especially if you go to church, but we don't understand how to live it. Well, today, as we kind of keep going and discussing this topic about being counter-current generation, what that means, we're going to look at two examples. One found in Daniel, chapter 1 and chapter 3, and then another one that we're going to look at 2 Kings chapter 23 with another young man. His name is Josiah. Because I want to remind you something. The world is changed by young people. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're older, you can't change the world. No, absolutely. You definitely can, and many have. But so many of the great movements let's just say, let's look at this very country, the United States. It was founded by a lot of young people, some even in their late 20s. Like, you think, oh man, if you're going to found a country, you might as well be in your 70s, know what you're doing. Well, many people, because just, I guess there's a passion that comes with being young and an ambition that comes with being young, that you just go for it. And I admire that. I admire that from our generation, because our generation, every generation has been labeled something, right? Whenever it was the millennial generation, I was like, oh, the millennials are so entitled. Oh, they're so entitled. They don't have any work ethic. Now, whether that's true or not, that's not for this episode to decide specifically. But that doesn't mean that the millennial generation didn't have anything good to give. They 100% do, and I kind of put myself somewhere like in the tail end of that millennial generation. But then Gen Z, here comes Gen Z, right? A generation that grew up with social media, a generation that grew up with technology. I mean, when I grew up, the iPhone hadn't come out yet. I remember when the iPhone came out. It was super expensive. We were living in Mexico, and a really good friend of ours had the iPhone. Eran miles de pesos. No me acuerdo muchos. Eran como 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 pesos. Eran un buen de pesos. It was just like so much money when that first iPhone came out. And I remember when the iPods came out, and then the iPod Touch came out, and then the iPad, and it was crazy. Most of my childhood was not with tablets whatsoever. We watched some cartoons, but it wasn't. I didn't grow up with tablets. It was only when I got older that I either got an iPhone or the first device I ever got was an iPod Touch 5th generation. Oh man. I even remember I got that baby engraved. That was a good memory. Good times, right? Good times. Now it's like you can't keep up with the newest technology. But the point is that this generation has grown up in a way that no other generation has, with so much technology, with so much information, that now we live in an age of confusion. Not really an age of information, but an age of confusion, because there is so much information. Sometimes there can be so much misinformation and just so many different philosophies and different ways of thinking, whether you're growing up and watching TikTok all day or Instagram or Facebook. Well, Facebook's for the old generation. I heard this one time just recently when someone says, the oldest generation is on Facebook. And then people who were a bit younger, they transitioned from Facebook to Instagram. And now the youngest have transitioned from Instagram to TikTok. So I'm not quite there. I'm really only on TikTok because that's just where the Andrew Mon show is, which, by the way, that's a little plug right there. But this generation, the Gen Z, something I love about this generation is that we appreciate and we affirm authenticity. I think that's one of the biggest factors about our generation, is that we don't like fake. We can smell fake, we can see fake from 2 miles away, and we like to call fake out. I love that. There's one little problem, is that we have replaced truth for authenticity. Meaning, if someone's truly authentic, then it must be true. If someone's really raw and they're honest, then they must be telling the truth, because authenticity equals truth, doesn't it? Not quite. Because I've said this before, someone can be very honest and they can be honestly wrong. Because authenticity doesn't always equal truth. But my question is this: why not live in truth and stand up for truth and be fully authentic at the same time? Be, as in the gym world, they're called natty. Now, if you're not in the gym world like myself very much, then you might not be familiar with that word. But natty means you're natural. You're not adding any kind of hormones or just any injections and anything to try to make yourself look bigger than you really are. You're natty. A lot of people are not natty. And we're going to do a whole episode about being natty spiritually. It's going to be awesome. But why not be natty, spiritually natural? Meaning you're authentic, but you also live in truth. Well, I want to dive into these two examples to show us, that's going to show us how you and I can be the counter-current generation. Because you and I, my friend, we can in fact change the world. You can start with your world, and then God's going to use you to change even more people. Well, I want to start with Daniel. So Daniel, you might not be very familiar with the story of Daniel, but Daniel was the first. He was part of, from the very beginning, when the people of Israel, it could have been Judah here, that they were taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar, and they were taken into exile for 70 years. Now, Daniel was from the very beginning all the way to Ezra chapter 1 with, I think it was King Cyrus when he set them free. So he was there the entire time present. If you haven't read the book of Daniel, you have to read the book of Daniel. We're going to actually read a lot of passages here to give us some context. But he was a young guy. Him and his friends that we hear about them, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Shake Shack, and Burger Shack, and some of his other friends. I'm pretty sure that's kind of how their names go. They were young men, and scholars, as I was kind of researching a little bit for this episode, they say they couldn't definitely be younger than 13. And because of the kind of program that they were enlisted in, that we're going to read in a little bit, most likely they were about 15 to 20 years old. So Daniel in this story, he's maybe around 15, 20 years old. I'm thinking he was like a young adult, but then they're there 70 years. So if he's 20 years old, that means he's 90 when, I guess he lived all the way to 90. So long story short, he was a young person just like you and like me. So let's pick it up here. We're going to be reading, in fact, from Daniel chapter 1, verse 3. So at this point, this is King Nebuchadnezzar gave an order to Ashpenaz. Now, Ashpenaz is the chief of his court officials. If you've never read the Bible this way, we're going to break it down because the Bible is relevant, it's alive, it's a true story. So King Ashpenaz was given this order to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal families and the nobility. So now we know Daniel came a little bit from a noble line here. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. So you already know Daniel, that guy is top of the crop. He was, and then it says that he was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. So this was someone that Daniel became very well informed with the culture that he was in. Then it says that the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. And they were to be there trained for 3 years. And after that they were there and they were trained, they could enter the king's service. Now listen to this in verse 6. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now the chief official gave them new names, because you're like, I don't remember any Mishael and Azariah. Well, because you got to learn from their Babylonian names. Daniel actually became Belteshazzar. Hananiah became Shadrach. Mishael became Shakeshak. Sorry, I always get his name confused. Meshach. And Azariah became Abednego. Verse 8 picks it up right here. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. Let's take a pause. So up to this point, they're being enlisted. Now, again, the reason that they're in this program is because they're already really smart. They're quick to learn. They're from royal and they're from nobility. So this is not like they just picked anybody. No. Imagine these kind of all-star training groups, right? You're at the all-star camps. You got chosen already. And this is a competition to see and be good enough to be trained for 3 years to serve at the king's palace. So this is nothing like, oh, it really doesn't matter how you do. No, you want to be the best at what you do at this moment. And the king said that they were going to serve them daily meals. The daily meal, an amount of food and wine from the king's table. So I guess they had to be above 18, because I'm pretty sure, the rules of the U.S., which I guess is 21. 21 applied in Babylonia, like 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So for sure, I'm pretty sure that's historically accurate. But it says that Daniel resolved himself not to be defiled with the royal food and wine. Why? Because you have to understand that Daniel, this is like way after the Levitical law. So being a Jew himself and being raised in nobility, you know that he understood where he came from. He understood his Jewish heritage. He understood about obeying the law. And a lot of the food was unclean. A lot of the food was defiled that the Babylonians ate. So Daniel resolved not to be defiled by that food, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now, God had caused the official, it says, to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, hey, look, I'm afraid for my lord the king who has assigned me your food and your drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men at your age? The king would then have my head because of you. So again, this assistant, he had a good point. He said, look, if you don't eat the food that I'm offering you, you're not going to be as nourished. You're not going to be as fulfilled as you have to be. Then verse 11 says that Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over him, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right? That's Meshach and Abednego and Shadrach. It says, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. So that's kind of where the Daniel fast idea comes from. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. It's kind of said that was the very first scientific observation, or the first trial by scientific observation that was ever done, because he's saying, look, have a control group, right? Your control group are the men who are going to eat the food, and then compare us to that and see who ends up better. So he agreed and tested them for 10 days. And right here, we're wrapping up the story. Verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice of food and wine, and they were allowed to just drink and water and gave them vegetables instead. Wow, what a story. Think about this, like it's one of those reality TV shows, almost like I have literally no idea when I say Bachelor or Bachelorette because I've never watched those, but it's one of those competitions. You got to be chosen for something, and they risked it. They risked it, but they vowed that they would not be defiled by what they eat. Instead, they put it to the test, and they ended up being better nourished and healthier, even when, think about this, even when they had the pressure of everyone else eating this amazing food. My friends, this is the beginning of being countercultural, because this world, this culture, every single day, my friend, has a choice of food and wine for you. It has a choice of how it wants to try to nourish you, what it wants to feed you. Some of us are at the mercy of the algorithm of Instagram, right? Just one swipe away, we don't really have control of what Instagram might throw our way. Sure, it could be algorithm, but the algorithm is always trying to make money in some sort. And if you looked a couple seconds on this or a couple seconds on that, all of a sudden it gives you advertisements of this, and you're just at the mercy of the algorithm. And some of us, our daily intake of any type of nourishment is whatever the world gives us. But to be countercultural is to refuse to eat what the world offers you. That's, if you're going to write any points, that's that. Point number one, being countercultural means you're going to refuse to eat what the world has to offer. Even though there's going to be peer pressure, even though maybe everyone else around you is doing it, even though your friends are watching this on Instagram, your friends are watching that on TikTok, they're watching these pictures they shouldn't, they're pressuring you into doing something you know you shouldn't, following people on Instagram that you know you shouldn't, and trying to nourish you with these foods that ultimately will leave you worse than if you were nourished the right way. Because think about this, think about the pressure that Daniel and his friends faced in that moment. Just like the guy that was in charge of them, they told him, hey guys, look, I respect what you're saying, but what happens when you guys are going to be way worse? And Daniel said, test us. Test us. We're going to really see if we're going to be way worse. My friend, I can't tell you this enough. The food that the world offers you is crap. I know you thought I was going to say something fancy. No, let's just say it as it is. It's crap. It's junk food. It's never going to be nourishing for your soul, for your mind, for your heart, and for who you are, because you weren't created by the world. The world doesn't know who you really are. The world tries to feed, the only person that the world tries to feed is your flesh. Now, anything good that the world offers is because it came from God in the first place. So it doesn't actually come from the world, right? And I'm talking about the coming from the secular and the kingdom of darkness. Anything that they try to feed you is not actually going to feed you. It's just going to feed your flesh. And because it's going to feed your flesh, your spirit, your soul is going to be unnourished. It's going to be undernourished, and you're going to see the consequences of it. So the very first thing about being countercultural is that they refuse to eat what was offered. So many of us, as I mentioned previously, we just eat whatever's in front of us. We're out there seamlessly just bored swiping. Up, swipe to the point that our thumbs hurt. And maybe we see something. And I want to just kind of mention this. It's not about like, oh, maybe you saw some pornography all of a sudden. I mean, that's a little intense and drastic. But it's just about things that just contaminate you. It could be something negative. It could be something so violent that all of a sudden that you saw that now it contaminates your thoughts. And it makes you feel anxiety. It makes you feel and have thoughts that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Because when you eat junk food, it don't sit well. When you eat crap, bro, you're gonna get some crappy results. That's just not what you're meant to digest. That's not what you're meant to be nourished with. So I want to challenge you. If you want to be the countercurrent generation that you are called to be, my friend, then don't eat what the culture offers you. Even when it's plentiful. I also love this point. Nebuchadnezzar made sure that they had everything they needed. Can I tell you that? The world is always going to be there to give you something. So it's not like you're going to pray and just say, God, I just pray that you would lower the influence of the world. The world's going to be the world. The world is going to continue to be the current that it is. That's in fact why I'm naming this episode the counter-current generation. Why? Because the current of the world will always continue. The current is the current. You can't stop the current. You can't pray, Lord, I just pray that you would stop the current of culture that is going negatively. No, the world will be the world and is doomed without Jesus, like you and I are doomed without Jesus. So you can't stop the current, but you can't go opposite to the current. You can't be counter-current generation. And the way you do that is not eating what the world offers you, not eating every single video that you see, not approving everything that you see on social media or here in person, no matter how authentic the person is. Because can I just be honest right now? Social media is full of nonsense. It's full of nonsense of a lot of people who are being validated for being raw and authentic, when in reality, no one should be listening to their ideas. Because now, instead of going to therapy, people go to TikTok. And they share all their issues on TikTok, and people don't really help them on TikTok. They actually just validate them. So they might have a serious mental illness, but because they're on TikTok, people are just go, oh my gosh, girl, guy, dude, you're just so brave, man. You're so brave. You're so brave to being yourself. No, my friend, that person needs help. Like that person needs counseling and therapy. They don't need affirmation in who they think they are, because that's just messed up. They actually need help. But hey, here we are eating everything that the world gives us, even when it's the peer pressure where you say, well, everyone else does this. Well, really, you really want to be like everyone else? I mean, maybe you do, man. And I just have to leave you where you at. That's fine. But do you really want to be like everyone else? You weren't meant to be like everyone else, my friend. You were meant to be the counter-current generation. Here's the second point I want to make. Is that the counter-current generation, not only does it not eat what the world offers, but it does not bow to this culture and to this world. In Daniel chapter 3, we see a moment when Nebuchadnezzar builds a statue of himself. And at a certain moment during the day, every single person in the empire, in the whole nation, has to bow to this statue. Well, in that moment, as in Daniel chapter 3, it says that there were some Jews who... Someone was complaining to Nebuchadnezzar that there were some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember, chapter 1, these are the ones that went through the school. So people already don't like him because they're different. Oh, I'm sorry. I know this episode might go long, but I just want to emphasize this. Some people ain't going to like you because you're different. You're special. You're unique. I know your mom always told you that, and I guess she was right. You are special and you're unique. But when you're going to be a set apart, you know that there's going to be some resistance. And people ain't going to like you. So what? Just shrug your shoulders and say, hey, that's your problem, not mine. Anyways, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty, they neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you have set up. The counter-current generation doesn't bow. It interrupts the status quo. It interrupts the current culture. It says, no, I will not eat what you offer me. I will not eat the nonsense that you offer me. I will not eat the anti-biblical values that you offer me. I will not eat any of that. I will only eat what God nourishes me, the truth that God nourishes me with his word, with biblical values, with biblical revelation. But not only that, I will also not bow to whatever the culture is telling me to bow at that very moment. Let's just be honest right now. The culture is saying, oh, wait a second. We saw that 2 years ago now in 2022, 2020. The culture said, I want you to bow to our definition in our narratives about race and racism. Although some of it was true, at the root of it, it wasn't. At the root of it, it was anti-biblical, what this kind of Marxist movement was trying to bring up. Again, that doesn't mean that they have some truth in it. It definitely did. But it's saying, I don't want you just to be in agreement. I want you to bow. I want you to give into it. I want you to actually let it control you. And then we saw that. We're seeing that right now with the LGBTQ plus agenda. You have to bow to it. The moment you pop up your head and you don't bow, hate comes real quick. Believe me. I know that. You start making some videos and people don't like you very much online anymore. And it's like you just, like I mentioned, shrug your shoulders and say, well, whatever. That's not my problem. My friend, it's time you interrupt the status quo. It's time that you do not bow. Because this is something just so interesting here that I want to just reaffirm this point. I think we have too many Christians who say, well, I'm not going to bow to the culture, but I ain't going to stand up either. Like, I'm going to just sit down, relax, and just shrug my shoulders, say, it ain't my problem. Okay, so I don't think you quite get what it means to be a Christian. Being a Christian is not necessarily just going to the mountain and praying and becoming a monk. That's really cool for maybe a calling that you might feel from God. But no, being a Christian is being countercultural. Like, the only reason that you and I are Christians right now is because the first disciples were countercultural and they didn't bow to the culture. Because the culture said, shh, hey, I know this whole thing about Jesus. Can you just not share it? Look, keep it to yourselves. And they're like, whether it's obeying God or obeying you, I'm a stick with God, you know? And here we are, you and I, believers, or if you're not a believer, here am I sharing this message to you. Because, my friend, in order to find the meaning and significance that you're looking for in your life, it is time for you to stand up. You can't stay seated and do not bow to the culture. It is time for you to stand up and see that difference. Here's the last point. The last point is found in Matthew 22, verse 37. This is when Jesus replied, talking about the greatest commandments. He said, the first one is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. That is the third thing that the countercurrent generation does. First thing is we don't eat the crap that's offered to us. Just plain and simple, man. I'm not going to believe all this nonsense about gender. No. So what? Like, what you going to do? No, I'm not. I'm not going to believe this nonsense about trying to undermine scripture. Nope. Not gonna do it. Oh, you're gonna hate me? Okay, so what? Jesus said people was gonna hate me anyways for following him. No, so I'm not gonna eat that crap. I'm also not gonna bow. I'm not gonna bow. And not only am I not gonna bow, I'm not gonna sit down. I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna stand up and make a difference. And in Matthew 22, it says that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Some of us only love him with our mouth, but nothing else. But you notice, like, it's not there, right? That's not in the list. Because out of what? The overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So some of us pretend that we love God and we just say jargon, but we don't actually love him with all our heart, our soul, and our minds. We have to learn how to think with reason and how to honor God by thinking deeper about our faith, because some of us haven't given it, more than two thoughts to why we believe something. So as the CC generation, we got to be like Daniel in Shake Shack and Burger Shack and what other shacks are there? There's like Shake Shack, Burger Shack. There's probably some other restaurants in there. But you get who I'm talking about. Daniel and his friends. We ain't going to eat the crap that the world offers. So we're also not going to bow. And we're going to be, like Jesus said, to love God with everything, with heart, soul, and mind. And that's the example of Josiah. And I want to finish with this verse in 2 Kings chapter 23. This is when King Josiah, a young man himself, I think he was put king when he was just 8 years old, coming from generations that didn't quite honor God. And they had lost the law meaning scriptures, and they found the law again. In their response to finding the law, this was it. And this is what we pick it up in chapter 23. It says, the king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord to follow the Lord and keep his commandments, statutes and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in this book. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant. My friend, that's the question for you. Are you ready to be the countercurrent generation? One that lives to make a change. One that doesn't eat the crap. It does not bow, in that we pledge ourselves. We commit ourselves to love God with all of our mind, with all of our heart, and all of our soul, and to follow his statutes and his decrees. Because some of us, the reason we're not quite seeing our faith come into fruition is because we haven't quite been obedient. We're trying to do faith on our own terms. But I promise you, I guarantee you, the moment you do things God's way, it's not easy, but it's fulfilling and you're going to see results. I have a huge announcement coming up. Again, do not forget this. We are launching Countercurrent Generation. It's going to be something awesome. I'm going to give more details on social media, so make sure to follow there at The Andrew Ramon Show, because this week, it's going to be great. It's going to be so good. So we'll see you in the next episode of The Andrew Ramon Show. Take care.